In a world where kingdoms fall and stars still remember names, this song was forged from magic memory and the dream that refused to die. Welcome to a tale where wonder still breathes. This is the story called Byul's Comedy Kingdom, when laughter becomes a love language created by Pacampara. If this tale stirred something in you, a memory, a dream, or a truth, our Ko-fi, Amazon, and Patreon links are in the description. Support helps us keep writing for you and the ones you hold dear. Once, in a time that never quite decided if it was a memory or a dream, there lived a jester who fell in love with three queens. He wasn't a prince or a poet, nor a warrior with victories to serenade his name. He had only one talent, a single trembling flame that flickered through his days, and he could make people laugh not elegantly, not even consistently. His jokes were unevenly sewn things, born from nervous pauses and sudden grins. But when they landed, the world seemed to loosen its color and breathe again. The three queens, Byul of the Crescent Court, Yongsun of the Eternal Teacup, and Bean of the Ribbons and Rain, were impossible to impress. They ruled a small but radiant realm known as the Comedy Kingdom, where laws were made of wordplay and taxes were paid in good humor. Effort without fun, they often said, is the greatest sin. The jester had loved them long before they knew his name. He watched them rule from the shade of the courtyard, their laughter tumbling like chimes in a summer breeze. When Byul sparred with her advisors in puns, when Ween sent music to jokes that shouldn't have worked, when Yongsun smiled quietly and turned even silence into a rhythm, he found himself desperate to be part of their chorus. So one evening, with trembling hands and a heart too big for his chest, he walked up to their throne of laughter and bowed so deeply his cap bells rang like distant stars. "My queens," he said, "I have no crown and no song and no sword, but if you let me, I'll make you laugh until the night forgets it's dark." Byul raised a brow. "That's your weapon? Jokes?" Wayne leaned forward, curious. "How many do you have?" Yongsun's gaze softened, the way dawn softens frost. "And what will you do if we don't laugh?" He studied them, this grin trembling but true. "Then I'll keep trying," he said, "until even failure finds me fun." The queens exchanged glances, equal parts amusement and intrigue, and at last, Byul clapped once. "Very well, you have a week. If you can make us laugh until the moon changes its tune, we'll grant you a place in our court. Fail, and you'll join the silent order of poets who took themselves too seriously." And so began his crusade of laughter. He juggled pastries and promptly dropped them. Told stories about ducks with drinking problems, jesters who applied for knighthood, and shoes that fell in love with their owners. He sang parody ballads in broken rhyme, danced with broomsticks when partners refused, and rehearsed jokes before the mirror until even his reflection groaned. Each night ended the same. Byul snickering despite herself, Ween pretending not to laugh but hiding her smile behind the cup, and Yongsun shaking her head, half pity and half admiration. On the seventh night, his voice cracked on the final punchline. Exhausted, he sat before them, cap bells stilled. "Maybe laughter's not my gift," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just the man foolish enough to chase it." The hall went silent. Rose, her gown whispering through the hush. "No," she said, "laughter was always your gift. You just didn't know that it was ours too." Byul tossed him a scepter made of starlight and grass, and Wayne draped her ribbon around his shoulders, and Yongsun pressed his palm against his cheek. "Your task was never to make us laugh," she whispered. "It was to remind us how." And now, from that night on, the jester became their fourth heart. The fool could turn sorrow into song. The man who believed laughter could keep the sun alive. It is said that sometimes, late in the kingdom's quiet hours, the queens still call to him to the courtyard. He arrives sleepy-eyed, barefoot, joke book in hand, and when they ask for a story, He begins the same way every time. Once there was a jester who fell in love with three queens. Before the first punchline laughs and lands, they already start laughing. The comedy kingdom was never on the map. It lived where sound turned to light and light remembered to laugh. Its gates were garlands of punchlines, its streets paved with all the applause, its rivers running clear with the kind of joy that leaves sugar on your tongue every Friday. The bridge of clapping hands unfurled toward the palace, and just crossed it with the nervous ceremony of a pilgrim and the foolish bravery of a clown in love. He came as he always did, ink on his fingers, flour on his sleeves, bucket full of half-born skits, and three undeniably terrible dad jokes that he guarded like lyrics. Effort without fun is cringy. The queen's jokes had agreed, and Jess had written those words on the inside of his wrist as if they were a compass. The guards, plush toy knights with terrible smiles, bowed wherever they remembered to. Bells on their helmets chiming like a little hello that always steadied him, a sound like tiny promises. Byul lounged on a beanbag shaped like the moon, her scepter a microphone, mischief sparking across her face like flint. Late again, crown prince, she drawled, rolling a glow stick between her fingers. Your muse unionizing, negotiating, Jess said, bowing until the floor caught his breath. I offered overtime benefits and stock breaks. She demanded confetti and a nap. We in perched on an aerial silk swing, laughed so suddenly. The silk fluttered like a startled bird, and Yungsin smiled with a tea-steam gentleness, the kind of smile you wanted to wear as armor. She lifted the cup and shaped the microphone in sipped silence. Begin, she murmured, and the aurora curtains fell open to reveal the stage, a lake of light that remembered every step he'd taken here. It opened with lettuce, knock knock, let us in. It's raining puns and suffered the royal groan, and 10 points for Dusty, -5 for trauma. And then he challenged Byul to a dad joke duel in the court. Jester, the poet, the pastry maker, and even the philosophical goose leaned forward in ceremonial dread. They traded lines like fencers, in pasta and no guts, outstanding in his field, already as old as the moon, and though she beat him by a heartbeat and a half smirk, the bells are wrong, the cornicles chimed when he laughed, losing. The fireflies along the stage rose in reverberation. There it was, a little sign that he was still growing braver than his fear. Not every lesson was learned beneath the spotlight. In the days between Fridays, he just slipped from the palace in a hat stitched with silver bells and joined the comedy pilgrims as they rolled their painted carts through villages. The carts were murals of giggles, blue whales smirking into teacups, sons with crooked teeth, and saints caught mid-eye roll. The pilgrims wore coats lined with buckets of confetti and carried ladles to scoop laughter from the crowds as if it were soup. They let children tie fresh ribbons to their sleeves so jokes could breathe and grow. At dawn, they stood in circles and recited rituals. Call and response puns, the naming of 3 ridiculous things each was grateful for, and the solemn passing of a rubber chicken as a scepter of joy. Every laugh's a lantern, the high fool intoned, capering with old grace, and hold it close to storm. Just watched and drew the quiet quill in a loud world. Cataloged what made different hearts laugh, a gentle teasing for the baker and the widower, slapstick spills for the apprentices, and wordplay for the poets, shameless cringe for the youths practicing bravery. In a small town where the bell tower had cracked and people spoke softly, if not to wake their sorrow, the pilgrims staged a parade of blunders. They tripped on nothing, apologized to lampposts, serenaded benches. I only have seats for you, until the first stone giggle cracked the town's shell. Just felt the lanterns flicker on. He scribbled in his journal, humor is a ligament, joints pains to hope, and let's move again. Back in the palace, he trained Wingin to look him to the music room, and she took him there, where metronomes stick like curious beetles, and the lamp piano hummed with old jokes. Comedy is rhythm, she said, tapping his wrist. Then the downbeat on his chest. Set up, breathe, drop. Leave room for the laugh to land. She turned scales to punchlines, chords, changes to reveals, and made him practice the pause, the brief silence before the applause. He was clumsy at first. She only grinned and said, "Clumsy is a tempo too." Under the candlelight, Gibson spread lyrics across a table cluttered with teacups. In the Tiny Bells parody, she said, "I swarm is love dressed as mischief." Together they rewrote their own verses, swapping grandeur for domestic chaos, reverence for the soft joke of existing. She taught him how to bend melodies without breaking them, how to let a joke be a bridge rather than a blade. When he faltered, she hummed a small line, half lullaby and half secret, something like a moonlight sonata with a wink. He breathed easier just by hearing it. Byul trained him as if timing were swordplay. They stood in a court littered with foam swords and cue cards, and she struck his instincts with a grin and said, "You are too earnest by half," she said, darting with a feint. Paris sincerity, trust timing. She made him do the same punchline a dozen ways, fast, slow deadpan, and utter nonsense, until muscle memory and mischief fused. When he landed the line just right, the bells along the practice hall chimed of their own accord, and she didn't say "good job" so much as a huff, a laugh, and a shoulder bump, like him, like a veteran sparring partner who had seen something promising. Then came the festival of cringe, the kingdom's annual sacrament. Lanterns paraded the streets like constellations fallen to earth. The decree was simple. Everyone must perform their most embarrassing talent before the grand audience of the moon. Noble suits, queens, onto their dignity. Jesters polished their pratfalls, and even philosophical gooses rehearsed a monologue about breadcrumbs and existential dread. Yung opened with a parody of her own song, sleeping between keys with dramatic false mixery, inserting kitchen disasters into grand choruses, letting a deliberate clack in her high note turn into a wink for anyone who ever loved her too seriously. The crowd roared, "It takes royal courage to let yourself look silly." Wien followed with existential jazz hands, a dance that traveled the full range of human folly. Fingertips questioning the meaning of toast, hips narrating the heartbreak of missing socks. In the Narabas suggested we are all really just tall children pretending at balance. And Byul, sentenced by her own decree, delivered a set of tragic jokes with a face carved from stoicism. "I once told the pawn so bad it left," she intoned, "and now that I am in a committed relationship with silence." The courtyard held its breath until Jess snorted, unable to stop himself. The laugh cracked the hush, and then laughter surfed outward in ripples until even the statues looked like they were trying not to grin. Contestants followed, jesters who juggled their breaths, nobles who unveiled interpretative odes to their teenage journals, and the baker who attempted opera with the rolling pin as a baton. A dog who refused every cue but took a bow anyway to thunderous applause. And most scandalous of all, a cat named Majesty who performed slapstick with the detached boredom of one above earthly matters, sauntering across a line of cream pies, batting a tambourine, collapsing dramatically into a box labeled Schrodinger's. The cat still flicked like a conductor's baton, and the crowd dissolved into helpless joy. Vulnerability, just realized, was swagger in reverse. It took you to a different courage to risk being laughed at for the thing he feared you were. And when Jess's turn came, he stepped into the wash of moonlight with his journal tucked inside his jacket like a talisman. He confessed in jokes that softened the edge How he refused to fear a room after the laughter left. How loneliness once layered itself in his chest like dust. And how he learned to talk to silence as if it were a friend who needed reassurance. He offered the worst bond he owned as a penance and gift. I tried to write a joke about infinity, he said, steady now, but it had no end. Groans rose and fell like a tide, then applause, then a bright chiming, as if the rafters themselves approved. Fireflies spilled from the garden hedges and settled on his leaves like epaulets of light bells. Some were unseen and answered. A call back from the universe. You are doing it right and keep going. When the confetti thinned and the night cooled, the kingdom exhaled. Jess took the long steps down to the moonlit courtyard, alone by instinct and old habit. The silence slid around him like a familiar coat. He looked up at the Aurora Webb's court on the palace spires and whispered to a sky that always listened. What happens when laughter stops? Memory answered, a room with no bells. A younger self measuring his worth and how quiet he could be, so he wouldn't break anything. He closed his eyes and then the bells in the garden chimed, soft as a hand on the shoulder. He laughed at himself and then, small and true, okay, he said to the dark, I hear you. That night, sleep staged a play. A kingdom dimmed into velvet shadow, and the stage boards creaked, and the tragedy walked on soft shoes. Byul stood center with her microphone scepter turned to rust. Wayne's melody faltered into a minor key, and Youngsun sang a line that refused to resolve, hanging like a star that couldn't remember its orbit. Just opened his mouth for a joke, and found only petals falling. Red, quiet confessions too fragile for punchlines. He understood then that laughter was not a negotiation of grief, but a companion to it. Jokes were bridges built over fault lines, so love could cross without breaking. When he woke, the horizon was serene screen in the early light. The ink on his fingers a promise to tell it funny and tell it true. Morning found him writing on the palace steps, trying out a new beat where he apologized to a lamppost for making it listen to his problems, and Byul read over his shoulder and pretended to gag. Too sappy, she said, but then ruffled his hair like a hawk, disguising affection as a weather. Wind stick with sugar and sleep, hummed the timing and tapped the punchline's heartbeat against his wrist. Youngsun kissed his temple and said softly, too beautiful, which only made him blush and drew in the timing, which they all agreed was even better. The weeks braided themselves into ritual. He kept joining the comedy pilgrims, learning the choreography of kindness, how to leave a joke like a seed for a day that hasn't learned yet how to smile. He trained until timing lived in his bones, Ween's metronomes and Youngsun's candlelit edits, Byul's dueling quips. He dove into the festivals of earnest embarrassment and let himself be ridiculous enough to be brave. Each time fear rose, the kingdom answered with a callback motif. Bells in eaves, bells in cups, bells stitched secretly by Ween into the hem of his jacket that chimed when his heart rate found the courage to laugh. Fireflies appeared like soft punctuation to every moment. He chose joy over dread, hope over performance, and love over the safety of an old quiet ache. After the grandest festival of the season, lanterns braided to the stars, pies and poems and pratfalls exhausted, the courtyard emptied into the hush reserved for final vows. Just found Youngsun by the reflecting pool, where the moon kept duplicated itself, folded neatly into the water. He told her the truth, that he lived under all the jokes, that laughter had saved his life, and that it offered him a language when grief made him tongue heavy, and that her smile had been the first audience that mattered. I thought survival meant being quiet, he said, hands open, afraid and decided. But then you asked me to make you laugh, and suddenly I wanted you to live loudly. Thompson's fingers found his, threading through without ceremony. Love, she said, looking at his reflection, then to him. is a laughter that never ends, even when the room is silent. We don't laugh to forget pain. We laugh because we believe we're more than it. She tugged him closer until his forehead and settled against hers. In the edges of the moment, a cluster of fireflies rose, and the smallest bells in the jasmine chimed. And even if it was only the wind, the timing was too perfect to not be blessed. They stood like that in a long line, no punchline required, the air full of music that hadn't decided what song it wanted to be. Somewhere distant, Queen's soft voice slid across the stones, half singing a praise and once whispered in passing. It wasn't a full melody, more like a promise to return to the note later. Byul's laughter drifted after, followed by a theatrical ew, and then an unmistakable sound of her taking a picture she'd claimed to delete and never would. The palace of laughter had quieted into a tender hush that follows joy, the kind of silence where the echoes of giggles still hum in the walls. Like perfume that refuses to fade, and outside the moon hung low over the comedy kingdom, brushing its silver over the beanbag thrones, the confetti-strewn courtyard, and the mugs left half full of sweet tea. Byul sprawled sideways on her moon-shaped seat, crown tilted like a secret, and kicking her feet lazily. "Did you hear?" she began, her voice mock grave, "that someone on the outer provinces is spreading fake news that our jester joined the monastery." Just tuning his guitar by the window didn't look up. "Impossible. They have a vow of silence. I'd never survive." Reen giggled, sketching the scene in charcoal lines, and Bill smirked, Yong-soon's quiet glow and Jess' ridiculous earnestness. "They'd throw him out before Vespers," she said, her whispering funds into the statues. Yong-soon shook her head fondly. "They would throw him out," she murmured, and then they'd stand by the gate telling jokes to the monks until they laughed their vows away. Just strummed the chord and pretended to put and pout. "You monk, your devoted husband, and yet I still serenade you every night. What does that say about love? That it's a chronic condition," Bill said. "A renewable resource being offered. A divine comedy," Young finished, her song a song in itself. They laughed together softly, like the last refrain of a lullaby. The room filled with that warmth only old laughter can build, layered memories. The festivals, the duels, and the puns that fell flat, and the ones that healed. At the palace doors, the scroll unfurled with the flourish only Byul could choreograph. Ink gleamed like what mischief, royal decree. It read in her unmistakable hand, "Next week's challenge, serenade us while telling the worst pun imaginable." Underneath, a second line appeared in Yongsun's study script, "Because sometimes effort is the most beautiful cringe of all." And the third, added later, in a looping flourish from Ween, "And please keep it in tempo, clown prince." Jess laughed helplessly, and the bells, those conspirators of courage, answered. Fireflies drew a brief crown across his hair before letting and lifting it into the warm dark. He tucked his journal away, already hearing the rhythm of a tune he would write badly and sing with his whole heart, already drafting a pun so terrible it might bend the moon into a smile. He lifted his face to the kingdom that had taught him timing and tenderness, the holy power of making a fool of oneself for love. "Okay," he told the night, and the night chimed back, "I'll be ready." The epilogue. Jess adjusted the strap of his guitar and glanced toward the three of them, his queens, his muses, his impossible home. "Then let me end tonight with a small performance," he said. "A little poem I wrote between jokes in case the world forgets that even laughter has a heart." He began to play gentle chords rising like dawn mist. The melody wove through his words, rhythm caught between prayer and jest. "The lanterns of our laughter, a poem for my three queens." And the courtyard where punchlines bloom like spring. Your voices light my midnight air. Each laugh a lantern taking wing. Each breath about that love still cares. Byul, you of stars and storm-born grin. You duel the dark with silver flame, and you call my heart a fool's violin. Yet it plays always your name. We in small riot wrapped in song. Your laughter bends the rules of pain. You taught me silence can belong to rhythm, rhyme, and rain. And yung soon quiet son of grace, whose joy burns soft as temple bells. Your smile remixed the wounded space where once my fear would dwell. Together you turned my trembling art into a faith both loud and kind. You built an altar in my heart where even failure shines. So when false news claims love is dead and sad songs haunt the tavern's floor, I'll trade the sorrow in my head for one more pun, one laugh, and one more. For laughter is the soul's disguise, a way to live beyond the end, to tell the stars we want the skies, but never mocking love, my friends. And when the final curtain falls, when time forgets our foolish rhyme, may laughter echo through the halls, the sound of love surviving time. When he finished, the guitar hummed a last note that seemed to bow before the quiet. Byul clapped once dramatically. Ugh, sappy, but I liked the stanza too. Queen dabbed her eyes and muttered, I didn't cry. It's just dust, romantic dust. Yung Soon leaned forward, her hand warm against his cheek. You never just make us laugh, she said. You remind us why we do. Just smiled, his heart swelling with a familiar ache of contentment. Then I've done my job. Outside the bells began to chime from the palace garden. Their gentle call back, the sound that meant joy was still alive somewhere. Fireflies stirred from their slumber, rising in slow spirals past the shadows. Byul threw a pillow at him. Next time, she said, write us a rock ballad about breakfast and taxes. I can rhyme bacon with forsaken, he said. We snorted, that's terrible. Youngson smiled perfect. Their laughter soft and boundless spilled into the night. It drifted up to the bells caught in the wings of the fireflies, and then joined the rhythm of the stars, proof that even kingdoms built on jokes can leave something sacred behind. And somewhere in that sound, the jester's heart bowed deeply once more, to love, to laughter, and the endless stage they called home. I make these tales and bits of chaos daily for my beloved Byul. They made you laugh, feel, or even just shake your head in disbelief. Hit like, share it with a friend, and subscribe. Let's keep this wild, heartfelt ride going.